Let's take a few minutes and talk about backup. We're going to talk about the different types of backup jobs, when to use them, and how to set them up. Everything within ShadowProtect is wizard-based, which makes it really easy to set up a backup job, but there's also a lot of technical power within those wizards as well. Let's launch the backup wizard. We'll click Next. In this case, I want to back up just the C and the E drive, and we're going to leave the F drive. We'll click Next. Now we can choose to browse out. In fact, you know what? I'm going to browse out and back up to this F drive as well. I have the ability to come in and name these files. So I know this is Austin's machine, so I can say, this is Austin J C volume, and then I can put that also on the E volume. So I know what machine and what volume that these images are from. We'll click Next. Here's where you select what type of backup job you want to do. Let's talk about each one individually very quickly. If you decide to select the Now option, you have the ability to come in, take a snapshot, and it will do a full backup of the entire disk, the application settings, security settings, everything on there. You can come back at a later time, whether it be a day or 2 or 2 weeks or a year, whatever, and if you have the full and you have the drive, you have the ability to scan both and then back up what's different. If you choose to do later, this is a full sometime point in the future. Maybe it's the end of the quarter for you. You can tell it to run a full at midnight at the end of the quarter so you know you're capturing all of those machines, and then you can archive that off or do whatever you want to do with it. The weekly schedule is our default schedule. Most of our small business customers and our desktop users live within the weekly schedule. By default, it's going to take a full backup on Sunday at 6 o'clock. Every single week. You're always going to take at least one full backup a week with the weekly schedule. Then Monday through Friday between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., it's going to take a backup every hour on the hour, and you're going to end up with 11 backups a day. So again, anytime that we start with a full, we're starting a new chain. So we're going to end up with a new backup set or a new backup chain every single week. We also can choose how often we want this to back up. If losing an hour is detrimental to this machine, we can tell this to shrink down and do it as often as every 15 minutes right here. And you can see within the same schedule, now we're going to get 41 backups a day. So when do you use the weekly schedule? Well, if you're not planning on backing up off-site through the internet, so meaning that maybe you're going to back up to a drive and then replicate that data to a drive, a hot swappable drive that's going to walk out the front door with somebody. Also, if you're just planning on backing up to a USB drive and you're not really worried about, complete disaster recovery with an offsite backup, the weekly backup is the easiest schedule to live in because you can set up a retention policy and get old backups out of the way and everything else like that. And that's the same with the monthly schedule as well. You can come in and choose what days of the month you would like a full backup to happen. We even have a last option. So if you want to just take a full backup on the last day of the month at a particular time, and then come in and do at least one incremental a day. This is going to be for your less mission critical machines. Also, you have the ability to set up a retention policy and tell it to get old backups out of the way when new backups are coming in. The continuous incremental, this backup schedule is unique to us. A lot of people, when they look at this, will look at the weekly and say, wow, this looks exactly the same. But if you notice, this says VSS incremental backups, and when we come here, this says full. So don't get confused that we're going to do a full backup at least once a week with the continuous incremental. It's not going to do that. It is going to take one full backup once. Then it's going to do the incremental changes from this point forward. When do you use the continuous incremental? First off, it was designed to back up locally and then allow you to ship this data offsite to your disaster recovery location. The benefit of this is when you only back up one full, you only have to ship that full once. Then you're just replicating just the incrementals, those small, minute changes throughout the day as they're happening. Again, so each time we take a backup, the incremental chain grows because each incremental is dependent on the one before it all the way back to the full. So if you look here, we give you a tip that tells you, hey, you need to install ShadowProtect Image Manager service with this option. So keep in mind, when you're doing continuous incrementals, you also are going to use Image Manager. You have to. It's a requirement. I'm going to show you how to set that up here in just a bit. So what's the difference between these two boxes? VSS incremental backups and additional VSS incremental backups. If you leave this checkbox, use VSS checked, the difference between these two is nothing. They're exactly the same. You have the option to not use the VSS framework. What that means is when we go to take a snapshot, we're not going to tell the framework about it. Meaning applications like Exchange and SQL and anything that's VSS aware will not be told to get in that good state. Typically, you're always going to leave this checked. Then if you leave this unchecked, you can at least tell it to do one VSS incremental a day. But again, if you're leaving this checked, the two options are exactly the same. And I recommend leaving it checked because simply you want your applications like Exchange and SQL and IIS and SharePoint to be put into that good state as well. All right, let's take a look at the next screen. Okay, so you can see here we do have compression within the backup job. Standard is going to get you anywhere from 30 to 50% depending on the type of data that you're backing up. High will get you about 10% more, but it may take you a little longer to back that up. So again, I recommend always leaving it on standard. We have encryption as well. If you check this, you can put in your own password, and I highly, highly recommend that you use a password scheme, something that you can put in a filing cabinet and lock away for this, because if you lose this password, there is no way to unencrypt your image. Let's go look at some of the advanced settings. We have a performance throttling engine built into ShadowProtect, but if you want to tell ShadowProtect how much I/O really to use, you can tell it that. But I always recommend leave this at 100% because if the server's not under a load, we're going to hit it for everything we can to get that backup job done as fast as possible. And with continuous incrementals, 99.9% of the time when you're taking a backup, it's just the changes. So they fire off really fast anyways. You have the ability to generate MD5 files when creating an image. This is a huge advantage, especially when you're shipping your data off-site to an off-site disaster recovery location through the internet. MD5 files allow us to use what's called a checksum and allows us to verify these files very fast and efficiently to know whether these files are good or not. We have the ability to run pre- and post-snapshot scripts. So if you have technology that's not VSS aware, like a really old version of Exchange or SQL, then you can come in and run a batch file or a VB script or something to put that technology into a good state for the snapshot, and then after the snapshot, tell it to go back to work. And then we have post-backup scripts that will run after every single successful backup as well. If you do enable encryption within your backup job, you have the ability to tell it what type of encryption to use. We have RC4 128, AES 128, and AES 256-bit encryption. So if you are a medical firm or you have to be HIPAA compliant or have other regulations on you, you can get that AES 256-bit encryption as well. All right, let's go on. I'm going to uncheck encryption. Now, we're ready to execute this job. I can tell it to execute now, or it will run at the next scheduled time. And again, it's always going to start with the full. So in this case, we're in the middle of production day. I don't want a full to start right now. I'm going to go ahead and schedule this to run later. I'm just going to click finish.